I'm recording now. Okay, great. Okay, so everyone, welcome to this webinar. Today we're going to be talking about 5 ways to improve your application before you apply. So let me just go to full screen here so you can see a nice view of this. All right, so just a little bit of background about myself. My name is Mandy, and I'm one of the senior consultants with Admissionato. I've been working with the company for over a year. And my background is in digital marketing and in fashion. And I got my MBA from Columbia in 2010. I then went to work at American Express doing marketing of their website. And I recently left to start my own company in the fashion industry, in fashion tech in New York City. So I'm in New York City right now. We're all okay after the hurricane. I thankfully was not affected too badly. So let's just dive right in. Okay, so right now, early November, we're looking at some round 1 deadlines, but mostly we're in round 2 at this point. So the reason for this webinar is to really show you guys what are some of the proactive things that you can do before you apply to make your application even stronger. So okay, there's a couple reasons. I talk to applicants and potential clients and clients every day, and I hear a lot of things about, reasons why it's not a good time to start their MBA apps. I think mostly because a lot of people going into this process, it's the first time you're doing this, obviously. It's very nerve-wracking. I'm sure you've spent a lot of time on, GMAT Club blogs, reading and obsessing about this process. And, the number one thing I hear is, well, my application and background are pretty much set already. Like, what else can I do? I really can't change anything. And also, people ask like, well, how long can this really take? Maybe I'll just wait until round 3, or maybe I'll just wait until next year. And, I really hate to burst everyone's bubble here, but, as a professional consultant, I can really tell you that both of these reasons are not true. They don't really make sense. And I'm going to explain to you why. So the first, basically what we're trying to say is that everybody wants to delay the application process, right? It's never going to be perfect. You always feel like, oh, but there's one more thing that I could do. Or, maybe if I just do a little bit more research, or maybe if I just, work a little bit longer and get 2 more months on my resume. I'll tell you right now, I always say that 99% of the time, the best strategy is to just start applying and apply now, because the process always takes longer than you think it's going to take. All right, so to address the first issue, which is, I've already been working for a couple of years. There's nothing else I can do to make my application better. Well, okay, so yes, I will give you that. But, between now and when you submit your application, there is still a lot that you can do to make your application more attractive. So we're going to take you through that. There are absolutely 5 things that you should be doing. And the second point is people always underestimate how much time this process is going to take. It always takes longer than you think it's going to take. Something always comes up. Maybe you get sick, or some project comes up at work. You have to travel unexpectedly. There's a family emergency. There's always a reason why it's like, oh, I get emails every day like, oh, Mandy, sorry, like, a big project came up at work and I can't send you my essay until a week from today, which is totally fine. I mean, these things come up. I'm not, trying to be too harsh about it, but you have to understand that this is a reality and factor that in. And this is a reason why you really should be getting on it. The fact that you're on this webinar shows you're probably already really interested or in the process, so that's great. Okay, so just a little bit about Admissionato for those of you who aren't familiar with the company. So in the past 5 years, we have done more than 12,000 applications. And last year, for example, over 50% of our clients were international. All of our MBA consultants attend Magic 7 MBA programs, Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, Columbia, the best schools, and have lived in the US and or Europe and are native speakers. The company was founded by John Frank, who went to HBS and worked in real estate, and Raj Patil, who actually was a screenwriter and Hollywood background. And they actually both went to undergrad at Brown and sang in a cappella. That's how they met. And I also went to Brown, so go Brown if anyone went there, woohoo. But the whole idea is that it takes both a business perspective, right? The analytical of how do you actually package together your skill set in an appealing way, but also a marketing and entertainment approach. So we always try to make sure that all of our clients have a very strong narrative and a very strong story that they're telling, because ultimately your application has to be as engaging and entertaining and as different as possible. And just a little plug, just so you guys know, John trains everyone personally. I was personally trained by John, and they still look at everything that goes out the door. And especially when there's a second MBA, like if you're doing a deluxe package, John always looks at all of the work personally and makes sure that it's up to the standard. So, all right, the moral of the story is, if you haven't started to work with us, you really should consider it, because, just in my experience of working with Admission Auto, our success rates are really high. Last year alone, I worked with candidates who ended up getting into Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, all the best schools. And I know for a fact that our process works. So that's our little plug. Okay, so let's talk about what are the 5 things that you can do starting today to improve your MBA application. This is very timely because we are staring down, the deadlines right now. So what are the things that you can do? The first is, pick your school selection, pick your schools, but we're here to tell you, don't waste time on this. The second thing is know your weaknesses. The more you know your weaknesses, the more likely you have an opportunity to fix them, or at least make it clear that you understand what they are and that you know how they need to be fixed in the future. The third is beef up on your extracurriculars. So it's really not too late to add some value here. The fourth is just do a gut check and make sure that your career vision, which basically is that one sentence that says, I want to use my marketing background to, become a consultant in the future at McKinsey or Bain, right? That one sentence that talks about what have you done in the past and what do you want to do in the future, that is crystal clear. And the fifth is, and we'll take you through this pretty thoroughly, but the fifth is take stock of what your quote unquote greatest hits are. Our idea is that every candidate has 5 great stories, meaning, recent accomplishments in their professional and personal life. These are stories that it doesn't matter what the questions are, whether the questions are, tell me about a time that you wish you did something better, or tell me about your greatest weakness, or it doesn't matter what the question is. You can always fold in a way to tell the stories about you that are meant to stand out. So we're here to push you to do that. Okay, so let's look at each of the 5 individually. And then just so you know, save your questions. At the end, we're going to open it up for questions. Probably in about 30 minutes, we'll open it up for questions, and then I'll do my best to answer everybody's questions. So just think about them and hold on them, okay? Here's a picture of a dog eating a turkey. Very cute. Okay. Okay, so step 1. Here's a simplified approach to school selection. All right, so I'm truly about to blow your minds here. The first is, clients, the number one question I get all the time is, which schools should I apply to? What program should I apply to? They'll send me an Excel spreadsheet of, I researched this school, I looked at this location, I've done all of this research, look at this awesome Excel that I put together. And I always turn to them and I say, okay, that's great, but stop. Stop researching. This is, you need to be starting on the actual applications. And the reason why we say this is because there's only one thing that you have to think about when it comes to applying to business school. And that is, what is the best school to go to? The number one thing is simply reputation. And for those candidates that are coming from China or from India, you know what I'm talking about, right? Like if you go to China and you say, I go to Tuck, I mean, that's a great, I mean, that is an amazing school, but there is going to be a sort of disconnect in terms of the recognition, right? So you have to think about when you leave business school and you go back to your home country or you travel or you do whatever, you need to make sure that that school has the best reputation that you can possibly have, right? So I mean, judging reputation, it really is different. So, for example, Yale, the School of Management, that's a great name. And that's really, really well respected in China. And if you go to China and you say, I went to Yale for grad school, people are going to sit up and be like, oh, wow, holy shit, right? But we all know that in the US, you know, it is definitely a top 20 school, but it ranks lower than Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, right? So you have to use that to your advantage and know, like, in your home country, or where you eventually want to go work, like, what is this reputation of the school and how do you use it to your advantage? Okay, really our message is you really want to just go to the best school that you can get into, period. Make a list, go to the best school you can get into. So, what does that mean? It means do not spend time researching schools that you may not apply to. Okay, creativity in this area is not really your friend. I mean, when it comes to business school, there are probably about 20 schools that you really should be considering. You narrow that down to a list of 7 to 10 schools and you focus on that. Don't spend any more time than that. You know, Once you're close to honing your list, you can reach out to people who can help. So, for example, student leaders from the schools, professors from the schools, alumni in your personal network. I also highly, highly recommend that you visit the schools that you know you will apply to. People sometimes ask me, like, okay, why should I visit? Like, can't I just say that I researched it on the internet? No, you can't. Okay, you have to visit because your personal observations, right? Let me just take you through what a school visit will be like. Okay, usually there'll be some sort of small session with a member of the admissions committee. They'll give you a little talk. There's an option to ask some questions, maybe do a little bit of networking. And you'll also sit in on a class, right? You'll sit in on a real business school class. You'll see what the dynamic is, what the discussion is. So, on a personal level, I mean, this is really an opportunity for you to say, you know what? Like, is this school right for me? Do I like this school? Do I get excited about this school? So for example, when I was applying, when I was doing all of my research, okay, this is a perfect example. When I was doing all of my research, I thought without a doubt that I wanted to go to Yale School of Management. I thought that it was going to be like the perfect school for me because as an undergrad at Brown, I had studied sociology. So I thought, well, this is perfect because they take a sociological approach to business. They really think about things more in a holistic way. This is a perfect fit for my background. Do you know what happened when I visited? I went to New Haven, Connecticut. I sat in on a class and I realized it was like a gut reaction. I was like, no, this school is not for me. And I'll tell you why. Because it was too familiar. It felt like exactly what I had studied as an undergrad. And I knew it was like this. I mean, not to knock Yale, because actually my brother ended up going there, but I kind of snuck out of that class that I was visiting because I was just like, this is so not a fit for me. I wouldn't like it here because it was exactly what I had studied as an undergrad. It was just like there was no difference. And I realized in that moment that I really needed a school that was completely different from what I had studied as an undergrad. And I wouldn't have known that had I not visited the campus. If I had just based it on what I had read and what I had, the little videos that I'd seen on the internet, I would have thought it was like my number one choice. But sometimes going to the school can really give you that visceral reaction, right? So I really recommend it. In addition, that's on a personal level. So in addition, on a business level, it's very important because during these visits, right, you are going to have observations. You're going to have anecdotes that you can then use in your application. So for example, let's say you were applying to Columbia, you could say, when I sat in on Professor so-and-so's class and we discussed the Home Depot case study, I was really excited by the engaging discussion that happened. I really loved how, one student went up to the board and started, plugging in numbers and everyone participated, right? Having those kinds of personal anecdotes goes a long way because it shows the admissions committee that you made the effort to go and that you actually paid attention and that, you took that information in and you let it sort of seep in and then you had a response to it. You were engaged. So I think you should definitely go. And when you go, bring a notebook, take notes of everything. Take notes of, what the name of the class was that you sat in on, the name of the professor who taught the class. Usually students are very friendly, so whoever you sit next to in class will be like, oh, where are you from? What are you doing? Take their business card, mention them in your essay. Say, oh, when I sat next to Eric, class of 2012, we talked about how we both happened to be from California. And, I just thought he was so friendly and great. And it really left a very positive impression. Perfect. Use that. All of that is essay gold. You need to go get that information and retain it so you can use it in your application. Okay, enough about that. Basically, the idea is that pick your school so you can start doing the hard work. There's so much other real work to be done. You already know the 10 schools from which you're going to select your final list. I mean, I can rattle it off, right? It's going to be Harvard, Wharton, Stanford, MIT, Columbia, NYU. Like, there's only a finite list of schools that you're truly going to consider. Pick from that list and keep moving. And most of all, go to the best school that you can get into. Okay, my husband just sneezed. He's fine. Okay, so step 2 is evaluate your weaknesses and then do your best to address them. Okay, so, we're still relatively early in the round 2 process, right? Most of the deadlines are December, early January. So you still have time to objectively look at your weaknesses, right? Let's take some examples. Most people applying to business school have maybe 3-4 years of work experience. They don't really have much management leadership experience, right? They've usually been, sort of executional. I analyzed the Excel and then I gave the numbers and I made a pretty chart and I gave a presentation. So one of the weaknesses could be that you don't have much international or management experience. Well, what can you do right now? You can, if you have a good relationship with your boss, ask them if you can lead a project, perhaps one with an international bent. And it doesn't matter. Okay, remember, right? They are not sitting next to you at your desk. They don't know and they don't care if the project isn't cool. If you say to me, yeah, I could take this project, but it sucks, it's kind of boring, it doesn't really mean anything. But if there are objective things that you can pull out of that project and talk about in a meaningful way in your essay, 100% you should be doing that. Okay, the second is weak GMAT TOEFL score. Well, usually in the GMAT, it's a one-sided weakness, right? Either you're really good at math, but you suck at verbal, or the other way around, right? Know what your weakness is. Let's say that you're having an issue, you score out of the roof in terms of the quant. You're like a quant genius, but in terms of the language, English isn't your first language, so you need to focus on that, okay? You need to know your weakness. You know that, let's say, sentence correction is your weakness. Enroll in a class, get a tutor, focus on that part of it. I really like the Manhattan GMAT books. Not a plug or anything. I mean, that's just what I used when I was applying. Because for me, my weakness was the quant. So I knew that because I was like, sentence correction, I could ace that all day long, you know. But the quant, that was the scary part to me. So I just sat down with those books. They have one per subject. They're very specified. They're like the maroon colored Manhattan GMAT books. And I did that. I would like go on the subway to work and do that. I would be on the elliptical machine at the gym doing that. You just would know your weakness and then focus on it. Okay. Another possible hole is that you don't have a recommender to write anything for you. Well, you have to basically understand what your options are and begin to enrich those relationships. For example, I'll tell you what I did. When I knew I was applying to business school, I had left one of the advertising agencies that I was working with but I still had a good rapport with my old boss. And I knew that I wanted her to write the application. But I didn't work there anymore. I hadn't seen her. She's a busy woman. But what I did was I emailed her, a couple months before, and I just very professional, very sweet, just said, "Hi, this is I would really love to apply for my MBA. These are the target schools that I'm going after. I've really admired you. You've really been a mentor to me in my career. If it wouldn't be too much to ask, I'd love to take you to dinner so I can discuss my goals with you and see if you would write a recommendation." And then I ended up, going to dinner, and we went to dinner literally across the street from the office. Try to make it as easy as possible for these people, right? They're busy. This is like the last thing they want to do is like write a recommendation. So try to make it as easy as possible. Took her to dinner. I paid for it. I had a folder printed out with my resume and a one-page list of just as a reminder, these are the projects that we worked on together because I don't expect her to remember, right? Handed it to her and was just like, here are the deadlines. Here's what I'd love for you to write about. Everything's just printed out clearly in a pretty folder for her. And then I followed up, with emails reminding her of deadlines. And then at the very end, after everything was said and done and she had submitted, I sent her a bottle of wine. This is how you have to do it. You have to sort of court your recommenders. You cannot just randomly email them frantically and say I need help. You need to treat this like a respectful process. They are taking the time to do this for you, and you need to make the effort to really develop that relationship with them. Okay, and the last potential weakness is I have no sizzle in my application. I worked at Deloitte as an accountant for 4 years. What can I say? I'm just like everybody else, right? So address it in a hurry. These are kind of extreme examples, but jump out of an airplane, adopt a turtle, start a cover band. Do something interesting. Do, in your weekends, start a hobby, start, mountain biking, start watching independent Chinese cinema. I don't care what it is. Just do it. And remember that by the time you actually write the essay, the admissions committee is not going to know that, oh, this is the first time that he's actually done, a competitive trail run in the mountains. It doesn't matter. If you can say that you do that, great, put it on there. Okay. We're making good time here. Step 3, hone your extracurriculars. So I'm going to start just by telling you my personal experience with this. When I was applying to business school, I took a look at my extracurriculars and I was like, wait, first of all, who has time for extracurriculars, right? You're working on your career, you're working long hours, you're running around. Any extra time, you really just want to watch a movie and hang out with your friends, right? So I was baffled because I was like, what extracurriculars? I did a ton of stuff in college, but that seemed a little outdated. So I basically, was in your position where I had a couple months to kind of make something happen. And I decided, okay, well, I'm going to do a combination of longer term volunteer type stuff to show that it's not just a one time thing. And then I'm also going to do one off things like events. So I literally Googled okay, I need to volunteer for something. And how do I do this? And I ended up volunteering for an Asian film festival in the East Village. It was a 1-day commitment. All I had to do was literally usher people from the door to where they were sitting. And then I was able to say oh, well, I volunteered for this Asian film fest and I actually am really interested in cinema and blah, 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 and talk about it, right? So that was one of the things. And that was easy. That was a 1-day thing. You can find anything that happens in 1 day and volunteer. And then the second thing I did was I actually ended up doing, it was an 8-week volunteer thing through a company called Streetwise Partners. It's a nonprofit. And it basically was, twice a week going in and volunteering and teaching at-risk youth Microsoft Excel and PowerPoint skills. It actually ended up being really fun. And I met tons of cool people. And it ended up being one of the really awesome things that I did. But I was kind of in the same position where I was okay, honestly, I was so busy with just life and work. I wasn't, the president of some organization. I just honestly didn't have time. But at that point, I knew, okay, there is going to be a section on this application where it asks me for extracurriculars, and it's going to be lame if I just say that I, you know, did all these things in college, because that was 4 years ago. So there's definitely still time to do this. So back to the slide for a second. I'm going to walk you through the two types of clients that approach us. And this is real. Okay, so the first kind is someone who really has his act together, right? Let's say he's an investment banker, he went to Stanford, he's a member of a hot boy band. He has real meaty things on his resume that really, great, A+ on that side. The other kind, which, I mean, this was definitely me, were the kind of people that did not have their extracurricular act together. Let's call him a one-hit wonder, Matthew Wilder. So, side note, see how this guy has a mustache? My husband actually works at this company called Tough Mudder, and they do these like intense obstacle kind of half marathon events. And anyway, this month they're calling it, instead of November, they're calling it Movember, and everybody at the office has to grow a mustache. So anyway, that reminds me of that. Okay. So let's say that you were in the first category, meaning you have your stuff together. You've been volunteering, you've been having leadership outside of work. Perfect. What can you do to strengthen your extracurriculars? Well, the first thing is you can actually seek out leadership roles in your existing positions, right? So let's say that you are part of a housing committee, for the apartment block that you live in. Well, see if you can become a VP of sponsorships right now and just volunteer for it. Great. Seek that out. You know, there's also a way to look for more international things from what you're already doing. And really, the point here is that good job, move on to the other things, because there's a lot of other work to do. So, what if you don't have your act together? And what if you are the second category where this has not been a priority, and we completely understand? Well, one way is that, if there's an extracurricular that maybe a couple years ago or even in college that you used to be involved in, you can get re-involved. You can be like, well, I actually want to be on the alumni committee. I actually also did this because it was like right after college, I had volunteered to do interviews for Brown University to, when they're like letting kids in. I was like one of the alumni interviewers. I contacted them again and I was like, I want to be put back on the list. Like, I want to interview kids. And then I did like 3 interviews, and then I was able to write about that in my application and say like, oh, and I'm also, on the alumni committee for interviewing kids for Brown. And it's just like, it took me all of 2 hours, but I was able to put that on my application. Also, if you have people in your friends and family circle, especially if you're in China and you have a close network, reach out to people, see if they have an organization or an NGO where you can volunteer your time. 100%. And then the last thing is, if you're ambitious, you can start something from scratch, especially if you're trying to go after an entrepreneurship angle. Let's say you're applying to MIT because you really want to be an entrepreneur, but you have 0 entrepreneurship experience on your resume. You've never started anything. I recommend starting something, even if it's like, I started a blog, or I started a meetup group for like-minded entrepreneurs. You have to show, especially in that case, that you've taken initiative before and that this is something that you're comfortable with. Okay, step 4. This is really important and serious, which is think about your career vision. Now, if you're early in the process, you may have no idea what I'm talking about. But basically, in every single MBA application, there's going to be a question. And that question is, what are your short-term and long-term goals? Really, what they're asking is, who are you and what do you want to do and why should we let you in, right? So look at this sentence in bold here. It says, given my passion in blah, blah, and my strong background in blah, 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 when I grow up, I want to do blah. You should be able to complete this sentence quickly and easily. If you can, perfect. And if you can't, that's a problem, and this is something that you have to work on. I'll tell you why. Okay. Basically, understanding your own candidacy and knowing what your strengths are is what these MBA schools care about, right? At the end of the day, you need to get a job. You're going to be thrown in there with, a couple hundred other bright MBAs, and they need to make sure that you're going to work hard and that you're going to get a job, because that's what the MBA schools are. That's how they're graded, right? In the US News World Report or the Financial Times, whenever they compare the schools, one of the metrics is always percent of students who with job offers after graduation. And that is weighted heavily, And if a school isn't getting their kids jobs, that's a problem, right? So they need to have the confidence that you're going to be able to, in the sink or swim situation, that you're going to be able to swim and get a job. And not just any job, obviously, but you need to get a good job. So, I'll give you an example. Let's say that your background is in engineering, that you were a technical engineer in your career for 5 years, but now you actually want to go into consulting, right? So if you were to craft this sentence, you would say, given my passion in the technology industry and my background in quantitative, electrical engineering, when I grow up, I want to be a consultant in the telecom industry. Just being able to construct that sentence and understand, past, present, future is very, very important. Okay, so just to go a little bit deeper in this, because this truly is the crux of your entire application, ask yourself these 3 simple questions. Okay, so first, does your career vision tie your past experience to your future goals? When I was applying to Columbia, for example, my career vision sentence, at the time, I didn't know it was a career vision sentence, but what I said was, I want to use my digital interactive marketing experience, and I want to start my own company that marries the creative industry with technology. That was my sentence, and strangely, I ended up actually doing that. But know what your past is and how you can use it with your future. The second is, put yourself in the shoes of the recruiter. Let's say that you're a recruiter at Bain, at McKinsey, at American Express, at Goldman Sachs, whatever it is. Would you hire yourself? Why or why not? Right? Is your background strong enough that the recruiter is going to sit up and notice, or feel that you are a good fit? And lastly, have you listed specific names of companies, titles, positions, timelines, etc.? I cannot tell you guys how many times I see an essay and it's like, I really want to work in the entertainment field, or I really want to be a consultant. Really? I mean, that's like saying, I want to eat food. Whereas I want to know, like, I want to have a deep dish pizza with pepperoni and green peppers. You have to be specific. So, for example, instead of just saying, I want to work in financial services, I want you to say, I want to work in the strategy department of American Express doing competitive analysis for, whatever. You just have to be specific, even if it's saying, I want to become a senior manager, or I want to be the VP of blah, blah, blah. The more specific you can be, the more convincing it is. Okay. And just remember that it's not too late. It really isn't. I mean, it's early November. You guys still have a lot of time. It's not too late to fix any of these things. But you got to get moving, because 3 months from now, when it's like January 1st, it is going to be too late. And then you're going to have to wait until next year. Okay. This last one I really like, because, this is one of our main philosophies at Admissionado, which is that every applicant has their own list of greatest hits. Now, let me take a step back and explain what this means, okay? So, for example, I mean, how many of you know the singer-songwriter Bob Marley, right? He's amazing. He had a really long career, but how many songs can you really name, right? He has like 5 great songs. And those are like the songs that everybody knows, that everybody sings at the parties. Similar like Michael Jackson, right? Michael Jackson has He has Bad. He has Beat It. He has Thriller. Is Thriller a song? Thriller? Yeah, Thriller is a song. My husband's nodding. He's like, yeah, Thriller is a song. Think about it. Every artist, okay, let me take one. I'll take one for the team. I'll put myself out there. I like Britney Spears, and her hit songs are Hit Me Baby One More Time, Stronger. Every artist basically has like 5 good songs that people can name, and then they run out of things, right? So how do we relate this to Admission Auto and the MBA application process? Well, basically the idea is that you as an applicant also have your greatest hits. But there are some guidelines. Okay, there are a lot of guidelines in constructing what these greatest hits are. And when I say greatest hits, I basically mean stories from your professional and personal life that truly highlight you as an individual and make you stand out, that show the best of what you are capable of, right? So one of my greatest hits, before business school, I would have said is the time that I worked at an advertising agency and I worked on the New York Times account and I helped them bring the very first digital version of their fashion section online. Okay, that was like one of my best achievements because I single-handedly was sort of the account manager that helped them bring T Magazine, which is like their fashion magazine, online. This was a big deal. Okay, so that would have been one of my stories. So let me just go to the next. This dog is crazy. So what I'm trying to say is it doesn't actually matter what questions adcoms ask you. It really doesn't, because if you can pick your 5 stories, okay, and my advice is don't use anything from middle school and don't use anything from high school, and I mean mostly don't use anything from college unless it's truly spectacular, unless it's like I was on the Olympic swimming team and I went to the Olympics in Beijing. Then you can use it. But if it's simply a story of I was named the number 1 speller in middle school, it's not relevant, it's too old. I need to know who you are as a professional now. Okay, so think about what are these 5 stories. Typically, they should be things that have happened in the past 3 to 5 years. And my advice is just open up Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel and make a list, right? Take 20 minutes, brainstorm a list. What are the projects that you've worked on? What are some of the, cool things that you've done? And it can be a mix of both personal and professional. I'd recommend like an 80-20 mix. 80% should be professional. Like I led this project. I was exposed to this team. I led the first ever acquisition of this company. Those types of projects, those types of stories, 20% can be personal. I ran a marathon and, in the desert carrying a backpack full of rocks. Stories that really are magnificent and make you stand out. Okay, so in conclusion, we're coming to an end. This dog has followed us. The dog on the right-hand side has followed us throughout the presentation. I kind of wish I had, paid more attention to him or talked more about him, but really I'm a cat person, so I kind of just ignored him. Sorry. Okay. The good news is that it is early November. You have plenty of time, but you have to start today. The bad news is, and I promise you, because as a consultant, come November, December, late November, early December, people are just losing it and going a little crazy because they realize, oh my God, I have all this stuff to do. So you really just have to start now. Okay, recap of the 5 things that you have to do. 1, stop wasting your time looking on blogs and reading about schools. Just decide now and stick to that plan. 2, understand what your weaknesses are and come up with a plan to address them. 3, court your 3, understand what extracurriculars you need to add and get creative and start reaching out and be proactive now. 4, understand what your career vision is. What have you done in the past? How does it connect to the future? And come up with that 1 sentence. And 5th, start creating your list of greatest hits. This is a simple list. It does not have to be pretty, but get it down on paper because this is going to be the gold that you use when you start writing your applications. So as always, we are here to answer any and all of your questions. So it's 9:15 p.m. right now in New York. So we're going to open it up to questions. And what I'll do is I'll just read out the question and then I'll answer it. And then, just following up, if you guys have any questions at all, or if you want to talk to me and do a consultation or have any questions, or you want to talk to the team, get hooked up with a consultant, you can just email. See on the screen, it says info@admissionauto.com. Just email us there with any questions. Okay, so great. Question 1 is, what if a lesser-known school offers me a full scholarship, but I get accepted into a top school that doesn't offer me any help? What do I do? Easy question. Go to the school that doesn't offer you any help. And the hidden known secret is that you actually can, once you accept that school, you can go to them and say, hey, I need a little bit of financial assistance. I mean, I cannot tell you, I walked into the financial aid office pretty much on a quarterly basis, and I would go in there and be like, hi, I would love if you could give me a little bit more of a grant because Columbia Business School is very expensive. And they actually ended up giving me a couple $1,000s, but no one's going to give it to you unless you ask. So I 100%, this is an easy question. Go to the top school. Go to the best school that you can get into. Okay. So more questions. Okay. Second question is, how do I know what qualifies as a safety school for me? Is it based on ranking or is it based on scores? Okay, so I would say an easy indicator to understand where you fall in the safety school range would be look at your GMAT score and just see if you fall within that median. If your GMAT score is higher than the median average score, then I would consider that a safety school. You also need to think about what your background is and how that fits in with that school, right? So if you're an engineer and you're applying to MIT, it's going to be more competitive because everybody's just like you. Same thing, if you're a marketer and you're applying to Kellogg, more competitive because everyone's just like you, right? So these are some of the factors. Another point, and this is maybe just personal preference about safety schools, I think in general, it is always good to have a safety school because people, at the end of the day, you want to have options. You want to be able to, at the end of the day, look at acceptance letters and make the decision about whether or not you want to go. You never know what's going to happen with the economy. You never know what's going to happen with the ranking of a school. Things change every year. I think it's a great idea to apply. At the same time, though, this is business school, and so much of it is on reputation and the name of the brand of the school that you go to. So I'm always conservative when it comes to safety schools. I always say, yeah, apply to 1, apply to 2, but really also be realistic and don't apply to schools that you know you're not going to go to, because that's just a waste of time and resources. Because at the end of the day, I believe it's better to apply again or wait or reapply and get into the best school that you can get into rather than just settle for a safety school. Okay, so third question is, do I have to make campus visits? I live in China and don't know if I can afford to make the trips. This is a really good question, and I'm very sympathetic and sensitive to that issue because I understand that a plane ticket round trip from here to China can be, $1,500 US plus accommodations and whatnot. My recommendation is yes, you still have to come, but that you should be organized about it. So to try to organize your trip to, be able to see as many schools as possible in that one trip and to familiarize yourself with the geography, right? So I had a client last year who was like, oh, well, I'm going to come to the East Coast, so I'll just go to Duke, UNC, NYU, Columbia, and then Tuck. And I had to, oh, and then Cornell too. I had to explain to him, like, actually, those are all really far away and it's pretty logistically difficult. That's the equivalent of me being like, well, I'm going to go to Asia, so I'm going to go to Taipei, Hong Kong, Shanghai, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, and Beijing. And it's like, well, no, calm down. Like, actually, like, Taiwan is a 5-hour flight and you may not be able to get a direct flight. So there are a lot of like logistical things. So don't just think that the US is like one big blob that you can just like see all at one time. Plan your trip accordingly. Okay. So let's be realistic and let's say you really, really just can't make it. I understand. Lots of people in your boat and lots of people get into schools without, international students. Let's say you're in Saudi Arabia or let's say you're in Pakistan and you just can't like get on a plane. I totally get it. What you have to do then is go to the local event. Let's say that you're in Beijing and there is no local event, but there is one in Shanghai. Well, then you better be getting on the plane to Shanghai. Or let's say you are in Paris and there's nothing in Paris, but there's one in London. You better be getting on the shuttle, the little like underground train thing to go from Paris to London. So even if there isn't something, even if you can't make it across the ocean, I understand, but you should try to at least go to a local event nearby in your country that's, a short plane ride or train ride away. This is an investment in your future and it will really help you to visit or at least go to an off-campus event. Okay, so the next question is, should I ask people who know me, especially at work, about my weaknesses? Um, well, okay, so I think that you could ask people that are friendly to you, you know, let's say peers or on your same level for advice about what to say. I would be very, very careful about asking, let's say, a superior or your boss, because oftentimes this is a sensitive topic, right? If people know that you're on your way out, you're going to business school, let's say that the company isn't doing so well, they need to downsize, they're like, oh well, so and so is on their way out anyway, let's just let them go. You need to be very sensitive to that issue. So my advice is always to be pretty private about your plans to go to business school. People will react weirdly. You never know what'll happen with the economy. I kind of think you got to keep that stuff under wraps. But if you have, friends, peers that you trust at work, that especially people who have maybe gone to business school and you who have a mentorship relationship with you, then absolutely ask them, to coffee to help brainstorm ideas. Um, I think that's a great idea, but be careful about asking people who actually have an impact on your job. Okay. Let's see if there are any other. Let's see if there are any other questions. Um, okay. So there's one question that says, I have great work experience and good extracurriculars and GMAT scores. Congratulations. But I got a C during a class in my master's program. Can this prove a hindrance for my application? Um, well, not really, to be honest with you, not really. I mean, listen, depends on what the C was in, depends what subject it was. If it was some sort of like technical masters where everything is sort of downflated anyway, right? Where like a B is actually an A and a C is actually a B. Um, I don't really mind that. And especially because it's graduate work, I understand things tend to get, graded down anyway. Like there isn't grade inflation in those types of situations. If it's an extenuating circumstance, there is an optional section where you can address it and say, during this semester, I was working full time. I was also doing an offline, off campus research project. Then you can definitely address it, but I say if you are going to address it, make it short and sweet. No more than 2 sentences, just explain what happened, get in and get out. But I also think that if, from what it sounds like, you have a really strong profile. If it's 1C and everything else is like an A and an A minus, it's kind of like, well, if your overall GPA is above a 3.5 in your master's program, I really wouldn't sweat it. Just for the record, I also got 1C in college, and it was like the most horrible thing that ever happened to me, but it really doesn't matter because it was in some like political economy class that I just didn't quite understand, so it's fine. And it was in my freshman year. Okay, so the next question is, can being involved in work-related charity drives and events count as extracurriculars? Absolutely. And, I would say that you want to quantify this as much as possible. So, let's say it was a work-related charity function. Focus less on the fact that it was work-related, but focus more on, the fact that you volunteered, how many hours you volunteered, what the cause was, how much money was raised, what your participation was. Anything that you can do to kind of quantify it is better. Just as an example, when I was working at Ogilvy, which is an advertising agency, they had a really casual program where it was like you could learn French, and you would go once a week, and you would literally sit in this like tiny stupid conference room, and like a teacher would come and teach you French. And I did that for like 5 weeks. And I totally put that in my application as, participated in Ogilvy and Mather's, French immersion program. I made it sound like it was like this big deal. So absolutely you can put that in there. Okay, so I'm just going to do one last sweep and see if there are any last questions. Okay. So there is one question, and it is it a good long-term career goal to become a CEO of a large corporation, or is that too unrealistic? I think that's awesome. I think everyone should aspire to be a CEO. In fact, it makes me kind of upset when people say that they want to be a CMO or a COO. I'm always like, why not CEO? So 100% you should do that, but it has to be in line with, again, your background, right? So if you worked in pharmaceutical sales, you shouldn't say that you want to be the CEO of, I don't know, Nike, right? Like, you still want it to be within the realm of reason. I think as long as it's within the industry and within the capacity in which you're currently, either working or aspiring to work in, 100% you should aim for the top. I think everybody should be a CEO. So I hope that answers your question. Great. So thank you, everyone, for your participation, for being involved. This was really fun. I hope that you all join additional webinars in the future. And again, like I said, if you have any questions at all about the process, you just want someone to talk to, you want to have a free consultation, just email info@admissionato.com. And then lastly, I just want to give a shout out to Ying Ying. Hey, what's up? She's one of my clients, and she's so cute because she's always on these webinars. So, all right, well, have a good night, morning, wherever you are, everyone. And best wishes from Admissionato. Thank you.